Mhm.
It's about how bad you really want it. And I remember when I was a kid, I would say that I was hungry, but then my mom would ask if I wanted to eat something, and I would say no, and she would tell me, then you're not hungry enough.
Hello, Derrick. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm good. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm very excited to have you. Everybody, this is Derrick from Alchemy. He is head of partnerships. And I first reached out to him because of a tweet that is going to be the breakdown outline of this whole episode. This is kind of a special edition hiring that I haven't really done yet before. So it's cool where my job and my life intersects with the crypto space and somebody that is posting about it as well. So, Derrick, I'd love to pass it to you. First of all, let me intro. This is episode 8, season 2 of Behind the Builder. So thrilled to have you on. Go ahead. I'd love a little short intro for the audience and a blurb about you and Alchemy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lindsay. Um, I'm Derek. I've been at Alchemy for around 5-ish months now, so not too long. But I've been in the crypto space for the past 6 years. I started in crypto writing research papers and then started trading NFTs. And I got that money through door dashing, and then eventually went over to creating like my own alpha group. And then working for different types of exchanges, and then eventually ending up here at Alchemy, where working a pretty cool role. I've always wanted to work at a company like Alchemy within Web3, some type of prestigious company that I've always heard of since I've been in the industry. So pretty happy to be here now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the first question we can kind of just start with, do you want to go through exactly how you got your hiring story at Alchemy?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of my hiring story at Alchemy, I actually applied back then in 2021, I think.
Wow.
Also 2022 as well. Just because I had heard the name Alchemy before. Um, I had known a few friends that were using it, so it was a big name in my head. And being a college student who cared about names, who cared about what type of company I was going to, I wanted to get into a company that everyone would know the name of. So I would apply to Alchemy, apply for managerial positions in which I was clearly not suited for. Um, but eventually, Glenn reached out to me earlier this year in 2024, and asked me where I was in terms of my job search, and he reached out to me at a great time. I was just finishing up a contract role, and so was just going through the entire interview process with Glenn. He's a great guy. I was consistently following up with him, and eventually, just because they had wanted to hire two of my other teammates who are currently working on the team with me now, and so was super excited to get the job. They had surprised me with like a call with a video with the entire sales team in the room.
Uh,
Just love the entire Alchemy culture. So super happy to be here now. And yeah, that's the journey.
that's a really good story. Um, and mainly, obviously, you talked a little bit about Glenn searched you up at the time. Were you active on LinkedIn mainly or crypto Twitter? Like where were you populating the web most that he was able to find you?
Yeah. I honestly don't know where I was the most. I was everywhere. I was trying
Mhm.
anything and anything I could do to get a job.
Yep.
I think a lot of friends, I'm from LA originally, and a lot of my friends at home know that it's been my dream to move to New York City for the past 6 years. And I have been trying relentlessly to apply for internships, to apply for different jobs. And I know, like Gen Z, for example, has the standard of always wanting higher or more than what they can get. For example, like me applying to these managerial roles. And eventually I realized and put down my expectations a little and settled a little. But then Glenn came out to me, and he actually reached out to me through the LinkedIn Sales Navigator. He found me through a filter called Super DGen or something like that. Pretty crazy. I don't have DGen in my LinkedIn, but um, he eventually hit me up on LinkedIn, and then we moved that conversation to a call, and the rest was history. So super happy about I guess LinkedIn being that option, but I wouldn't say that LinkedIn was the biggest contributor to that success. I think it's kind of the accumulation of all of the consistency and work put into looking for these jobs.
Yeah, definitely. All the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I will say, as a little PSA to people out there, like, a lot of my clients do ask for like DGen as a requirement for roles. So if you do have DGen, I don't know if it's a little cringy to put like DGen in your LinkedIn bio somewhere. Maybe we can recircle that, but it's definitely something that people look for because it comes with all sorts of other like it just is a full package. Sorry, I'm like throwing my chapstick around. Okay, so just a little bit like get to know Derrick. Derrick, just let's start with like, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do outside of work?
Yeah. Outside of work, what do I like to do? I listen to EDM. There's this basic archetype called like a SoCal Asian guy, and unfortunately, I basically fill out all of the boxes there. Not that I intentionally did by any means, but just I guess over the years, TikTok has just shaped people like me into an archetype. So I go to raves. I listen to EDM. I love boba and bubble tea. I love just going out, having a good time with my friends mostly. I think the biggest thing about me is that I love to just be around people.
Mhm.
For example, when I first moved to New York, I actually planned with two other friends to move into the same building. So we have three different units in the same building. So it's basically like a
Yeah.
dorm in here. So it's super fun. We're always around each other. Basically, when I get home from the office, I will be at my friend's apartment all the way until 2, 3 a.m., where we're either working, we're either playing games, or we're finding a new business idea. So it's all like super fun. And like, I always love doing that type of things on my during like my free time. I used to be a huge gamer. I was pretty competitive in Fortnite, and I was also pretty competitive in Valorant as well. And then eventually stepped away just because I found alchemy and crypto to be a little more important to me in my life. So here I am now. I still play games for fun, but it sucks not being at the top anymore because it feels a lot worse.
That's funny. That's a perfect overview. And I love starting with that too because it's nice. Like you've got the ebbs and flows of life. I think crypto also is it's a job that is like can be considered a great hobby as well. Like just you can spend hours, like trading if you want on crypto Twitter. There's always things to do.
Definitely.
Um, and what does your day to day look like at Alchemy?
Yeah, in terms of day to day at Alchemy, I get into the office around 10-ish. I'd say Alchemy has a really, really chill work culture.
Awesome.
We're not required to go into work, and we're not required to do anything crazy while we're there. And this is a big part due to Glenn. He's created a great culture around the sales team, especially around like the partnerships team, where we're able to just get our work done, make sure that you're staying on top of your leads, making sure that you're staying on top of what you need to do. For example, when I get into office, most of the time my first thing is taking a call. After I take the call, I'll relax a little, talk to my teammates, figure out what they were doing
Mhm.
the previous day or during the weekend, and then from there start doing some outreach to some businesses and going crazy on Twitter and Telegram. I
Yeah.
think like the biggest thing is that, or the biggest like blocker when it comes to my day to day would just be the fact that a lot of people think I'm a scammer on Telegram or Twitter, just because getting a cold DM or getting like a DM from anyone on Telegram is scary. We've seen those
Totally.
like crypto scams, especially, and with a lot of crypto apps being on Telegram now, like makes a lot more skeptical. So totally valid
Yeah.
assumptions there. So I guess like I spend most of my day taking calls, talking to my teammates. It's really insightful talking to the team just because I get to learn more every day about what it means to work, I'd say, in a more formal setting rather than for before I was working at Alchemy, I was doing my own thing, working by myself, and having this type of structure is a big step in terms of experience, and I think it's necessary in order to get to the goals that I want to get to in the future.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really cool that Glenn's created a good work environment. There's nothing more important than culture, and we'll get into that later. But I wanted to, as I mentioned at the beginning, base this podcast on the post that I had originally commented on. It's like 5 steps. You said that you had applied to 3,000 jobs over 2 years, 2022 to 2024, manually.
Yeah.
And you have proof to show that, a little screenshot here. Who was this post written for before we get into it?
Yeah. This post was written for people that are like people who went through the same people who went through and are going through the same thing as me. I
Mhm.
think the biggest thing for me when I was going through these 3,000 different jobs was the fact that I didn't really have anyone to talk to about this. I only had people to complain about this. How I couldn't get a job, how everyone was rejecting me, how I would get an interview, but then I would get ghosted. Um, I wanted to provide an avenue that wasn't necessarily traditional for people to look towards and for people to have an opportunity to see that, hey, this guy went through the same thing as me and he still has a job now. Like maybe I can do the same.
Yep, absolutely. That is like the most comforting thing in the world, is realizing somebody that has a job at a big name like Alchemy went through the same thing as you. It like there's really nothing better for people, and job process is hard and it's very individual. This is something that is obviously like I'm very involved in. So the first tweet you talked about, everyone always says to network. This is something that I heard throughout college. I graduated last year. Everybody's just constantly talking about networking. What is networking, and why doesn't it work?
Yeah, I think you're gonna hear me say this a lot throughout like the rest of the episode, I guess. But I truly don't know what networking is. I can't give you like a formal definition because
Yeah.
networking for me might not be networking for you, right? Everyone has their own form of networking and everyone is I guess like the way I would put it is networking can only take you as far as you're comfortable with, right? Like at the end of the day, you can go and talk to as many people as you can, and that's what you're comfortable with, versus someone who can just talk to one person and be comfortable with that and get to where they want to be. I think that networking is very forced in today's culture. When I go out to different types of events or different types of conferences, I see people who are simply asking the same questions to every single person, taking that contact information down and then moving on and then maybe reaching out to them later saying, hey, it was great to connect. Like that is totally a valid form of connecting, but I think it's completely inorganic and it doesn't have that quality of networking that people actually mean when they say like, hey, go network and find people. In my eyes, it's not about looking outwards towards these new connections that you might think are out there, that you might think exist for, let's say, a company like Apple that is hosting an event. And you think a bunch of Apple recruiters are going to be there. So you go to show up hoping that Apple will help you get a job because of this event. But in reality, I think that people should look inwards and really look at their close circle and look at the people around them who have jobs already. Those are the people who have the connections to get you to that next level. Those are the people who have met people who have moved on from their job and found new jobs because of their old job. And so I think that rather than looking outwards and trying so hard to always network, to always find new people to meet, look at the people that are close to you and think about what type of resources they have and how you can utilize it. Because you might not always be able to find a job immediately through them, but they have resources and experience that you don't have that will get you to that next step.
Yeah, and I really like the conversation about organic versus inorganic networking, because like let's say if we're talking about like the age we're at right now is kind of like almost graduating college, post graduated, and you're trying to figure out the first 3 years. So you've got like odds and ends jobs sometimes, especially in crypto, like you're not going to be able to get a job at a big name right away. Like you need some background. So you're looking to network, but how do you do that organically versus inorganically? Because I think that that's where the problem is, that there's no definition of networking. So it's like the concept is that you can just go out and talk to anybody and they'll want to talk to you. But it's kind of like some people will just talk to you, but like other people want you to also bring value. And that's kind of something I realized too when I first started meeting people is like just talking to somebody doesn't do anything because then the conversation ends. Like having an email correspondence or a LinkedIn chat or doing an intro call, like it just ends after that if you don't connect somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is more of a question for people like figure out what you're really passionate about and like dive in there so you can connect better than just like doing it for the purpose of getting a job because that's inorganic.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's very similar to the concept of like doing something just for money as well. And then in this case,
Mm,
it's doing something just for a job. It's
it's a great
hard
comparison.
to change the mindset where like, oh hey, I'm not doing something just for money. I'm doing something because I love it. Or hey, I'm not going for a job. I'm
Yeah.
doing it just because I think it'll make me more fulfilled. It's hard to change the mentality, and I'd say like most people aren't able to. But I think like even putting an effort towards that switch allows you to make like a conscious um, effort, I guess, to
Yeah.
change the way you're approaching things.
Yeah, that's a deep kind of like a deep unfiltered thought I've had for a long time and like I think that needs to be pushed away for this conversation. But what's your opinion on conferences? Like if let's do a scenario. If I had just graduated and I was looking for my first job and I decided I wanted to go to a crypto conference just to like seek things out and see what was going on, what would you do? Would you go sit and listen and maybe I don't need to come up with more scenarios, but just in that case, let's say you go to Token 2049 and you flew all the way to Singapore and you're just graduated and you're looking for a job, what would you do?
I would not fly to Token 2049 and go to Singapore. Instead,
Okay.
I would find another solution that would, one, either make it seem like I'm there, or two, find people that are there to help me connect with the people that I need to get to.
Hmm.
I think that conferences are very useful. Um, Actually, let me take a step back. I think only some conferences are very useful. I think a lot of conferences are actually pretty pointless, I would say, and a lot of conferences don't provide much value to not only an employee but also as a job seeker. I think like at the end of the day, the goal of businesses to be at conferences is to showcase their product, or
Mhm.
it's to sell their product, or it's to partner with another company because to get eyes on their product. Um, their goal isn't to be there to hire someone, and obviously it is very proactive of someone to go to a conference and to go up to these companies and to find the right people to connect to. And I totally respect the effort. I had a lot of people, or not a lot, but a few people come up to me during Token actually and ask me for jobs. And, you know, I did point them in the right direction, in the necessary direction.
Mhm.
But I think that doing it that way is again a little forced because you're not able to spend that quality time with the individual. Now, if you schedule like a coffee chat to outside of Token 2049 and to, you know, kind of get to know the person, to talk more about who you are, what you're doing, what the other person's building, what the other person's doing, that's completely different. But going to the conference itself, sitting down at those conferences, in my opinion, isn't even useful for someone like me who already is in a role. I think
Yeah.
that the biggest point of a conference is to take advantage of all the people that are there at the conference. And with
Yeah.
all the people that are there at the conference, it allows you to expand that network and to balloon your network even farther. Because once you get to know one person, you get to know two. And once you know two, you know five, and so on.
Yeah. And especially in crypto, like everything being online, it's really nice to have that in real life where you actually end up meeting. Like I went to a conference in Boston and I met 3 people that I didn't expect to be there that I had kind of like known from online. So that's definitely a good
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, I agree. And then a little, I think maybe I don't want to jump ahead here. Let's go to the next comment. So your main suggestion too is networking with colleagues that you already know and people in your network. Um, how did you figure out how to do this? And like where do you start searching internally more?
I think the biggest thing I had to do was dropping the ego. I think it's really hard to go to your friends and be like, hey, like, do you have anyone that could get me a job? And like, I know people do this commonly, and like, or maybe people do this commonly, but I think it's a different effect than when you genuinely work with another person to get you that new job. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people that you can ask for a reference, and people will give you that link, and you can go click that greenhouse link and fill out the application, and boom, you have a referral.
Mm.
Sure, that's totally great, and that might move you up the ladder a little. But in a scenario where, let's say, I worked with Glenn directly, the manager of the team who is directly responsible for hiring, having a meeting outside of, our interviews, before any of the interviews, to get to know Glenn a little better, for him to know me a little bit better. I feel like that's a big stepping stone. Even I know that, before I mentioned that having that inorganic type of relationship, but in my opinion, that still is organic in the way where Glenn and I spent 45 minutes talking on a phone call, discussing what possible options there could be, how Alchemy has never hired someone that is considered like a DGen before, and how he had to pitch to our director why this is, beneficial to Alchemy, and why pitching and why finding a DGen. And Glenn can only understand what I do and, what a DGen truly is, because he discussed with me and he talked with me for 45 minutes and truly understood me. I think that it requires, like, going to your friends and saying, hey, I need a job is very easy to do. But I think, like, going to your friends and saying, hey, like, I need a job, and like, we really need to work through this to get me this job. We need to go through steps A, B, C, D, E. That requires a lot of pride and ego to be lifted, to be dropped, in order to truly do that. I think people are too scared. I think people don't realize as well how much power the people around them have. And then at the end of the day, once they realize that the people who have the power have that power, they get a little scared and fearful of, taking that extra step towards getting that job.
Very, very, very interesting. And I also like the steps. I think that's a big difference than just like asking somebody to help out versus like being really proactive about it. And it takes effort. It takes a lot to figure that out. But it kind of is the big difference of whether or not that connection is going to be able to help you out, and if they are. Um, and so now to the next tweet, you talked a lot about being disciplined. Um, when you were applying for all these jobs, like, what was your priority?
I think the biggest priority for me was, initially, the biggest priority for me was quantity. And that's why you see that 3,000 plus number. The job that I was at an exchange, essentially capitalized on volume outreach, and the more outreach that I would do, the bigger the advantage that I would receive. And so I kind of wanted to translate that through my job seeking. And so I would search from, let's say, like 8 a.m. in the morning all the way to like 2 a.m. At night, I guess, just going through jobs, going through different posting boards, going through different Web3 posting boards, going through different Web2 posting boards, to find any job to apply to find any role. Honestly, I was applying for pretty low roles, and I think when it comes to discipline, it's not about necessarily the quality of work off the bat. It's about the consistency of work off the bat. Once you're able to consistently put in that effort, and in my case, it was consistently reaching out to companies,
Yeah.
then it becomes easier once you refine your process, because it's much more efficient. You're doing a lot less, but it's creating a lot more of an impact. So I think the biggest thing with discipline and consistency is that people fear it right away. People are lazy and they can't admit it. And those who do admit it still don't do much about it. But I think it requires a mindset shift again. And uh, a lot of people aren't able to kind of twist that gear. And I think that's what holds them back. But once you're able to even recognize that, hey, like, if I put in the work for 5 days, then on the sixth day, it's going to be a lot easier than it was on the fifth day. So
Yeah,
I think it just comes with time and a lot of effort. Um, and people should treat it as a full-time job, because if you don't have a job
totally,
and you're not doing anything on the side, then you have all that time in the world to look for jobs.
totally agree. Do you have habits? Are you a habits guy?
I unfortunately am not a habits guy. I am very impulsive. I am very on the fly. I love doing things on the fly with my friends. I think that's like one of the coolest things possible. Like just being outside and then saying, "Hey, like let's go to the beach randomly out of the blue." I think that's always like a cool thing to do. So
Yeah.
not always a habits guy, but I'd say for this, I'd say I created like a little habit for myself to put in that consistency. For things I think are valuable, I do create habits out of them.
Yeah. I'm not really a habits gal myself,
Mhm.
but I am trying to figure out where I do need habits because I think they are useful for
Yeah.
discipline. And so now we've got your next tweet. This was labeled zero backups, which I love. I think that's a great thing because you do get comfortable and complacent if you always have backups for yourself. Um, if you had been applying to Alchemy for years and you kind of you'd been putting that into the universe, and I'm a little bit of a believer in that. Um, don't have to get into that too deeply, but like, when did you reach a point of desperation that you realized you had to get rid of all backups? When did this epiphany come to you? Do you remember?
Yeah. It was when I graduated and I realized that getting a job was much harder than I had thought. I think I was clouded by like the fact that I had a few internship opportunities throughout college, and as a result, I was like, oh hey, like my resume is pretty good. I have a good amount of experience compared to my peers. It should be pretty easy to get a job. And then I was humbled really quickly, where I spent like over a year like looking for like a single job and I couldn't even get anything. And so I think like the biggest thing is like having zero backups. Even now, like I would say my in let's say like long term from now, like 5 years from now, I do want to have my own business or have something of my own of some sort. And I would say that Alchemy right now would be considered a backup, and it puts me at a place of comfort, and I clearly see it right now. Um, of course, this is like a different scenario where I think Alchemy is that next stepping stone to doing my own thing. But I do think like the concept, even now, like after working at Alchemy for 5 months, and um, this is so different from working on my own, where back then I had no backups, and now like Alchemy feels so comfortable. It feels so nice because I have such a great team around me. I have such great benefits from Alchemy. Um, it's such a great workplace. So then now I'm like, oh shoot, like I'm so comfortable now. Like, how am I supposed to get out of this? But I think like it comes again with that mindset shift, being able to recognize, hey, I'm a little too comfortable right now. I have a little too many backups. It's time to move on. And I think that's when that desperation starts to kick in. And yeah, when I couldn't find those jobs for a year, I realized, hey, like you're not as good as you think you are.
Yeah, it's constantly being humbled.
Yeah.
That is what a lot of wonderful people, that's a quality they all share for sure. Um, and it's hard. It's really hard to go through that process post college. Like when I post this, I hope that like kids, it's me. I am kids. Um, watch this and relate to that. And you're a very relatable person. Um, having gone through all these manual applications, like we've all done this. It takes months and years to really, especially in somewhere like crypto where it's small and you got to find your place. And it's not like finance where there's all these like entry level roles and internship programs and blah blah blah. Like you do have to get lucky, but also like make your own opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to talk about culture fit now. I really liked this part of your post. It seems like Alchemy is a great culture fit for you. How do you figure out what is a good culture fit for you when you're
Yeah.
looking for a job?
I think that goes back to my earlier point about having those organic and inorganic connections. Um, I think all of us know when we click with someone right away.
Yeah.
Like, you know whether or not you will vibe with someone. And I think it's important to capitalize off that. For people that
Mhm.
you vibe with, people that you know have the same energy as you, they share the same passions as you, whether or not that's like exactly the same or something different. It's always inherently the same type of passions, the same type of drive to love something, or the same type of drive to work for something. And having that type of similarity with someone goes a long way in the
Yeah.
workplace, especially. Every single person at Alchemy on the sales team has the same type of, I wouldn't say personality, but the same type of attitude, where we're always very uplifting. We're all pretty extroverted. We're all willing to talk to each other. And within the whole entire company, I would say that the sales team is probably like the most proactive and like the most fun. And I'd say everyone knows that. We have like an amazing culture where we're able to take a break and play some ping pong in the office, take a break and go on a walk outside the office. And I think like that's the most important thing when it comes to choosing a company. And I know not everyone has an option to choose a company. I personally didn't. I can be blunt with that. Alchemy was like the only job, and I purposely had tailored this down to my only job just because I realized that, hey, this culture fit is the right one. Otherwise, you're stuck with a job you hate, or it might have been a job that you really loved, but you lose that passion because you don't have
Mm.
that culture fit. And
Mm.
culture fit allows you to keep going within your job, right? For example, in hospitals, nurses have jobs where they have to deal with people who are in pain, people who are suffering, and might not be the easiest job. But when you have a crew around you who is always supportive, uplifting, people who have relatable stories, people are able to connect with you, that's where you're able to bring your work to the next level. And as a result, kind of bring everything else to the next level. And I think
Yeah.
that really resonates with recruiters as well, where if I'm applying to a job and they realize, hey, this guy has the same energy as everyone else on the sales team, you know, maybe he would be a great fit. And I think that's the best thing to do, is to show that personality, especially during the interviews. Show who you are and show what type of culture you'd like to be introduced to.
Yeah, especially the personality thing in interviews. Like, an interview isn't for going over your resume. Like, that's what your resume is for.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I think there's a fine line too between like everybody needs a job.
Yeah.
Somebody like, you gotta pay the bills, like whatever. That's just life. Um, and also like taking opportunities that as they come and not settling for something or having a plan. I don't know. It's everybody's job search is so different, like we've mentioned throughout this whole thing. Um, I think there's a lot of really good tidbits in this conversation that is important for people to keep in mind. Derrick, if we could like me and you like talk this through, if we could boil it down to three things that people struggling with a job search should prioritize, what do you think, like actions, let's say?
I would say the biggest action is to ask the people around you first what they've done, who they are connected with,
Mhm,
and what they can do for you.
mhm,
And that's the number one tip I would give. And number two, I'd say, is look into things that you love to do. And it's okay if that means it takes a little longer, because when you apply to things you want to do, you not only have the work already to show for it, but you also express that passion when you're talking to the
yes.
other side.
This is a
you
great point.
you really get to understand what you're going for, and they get to really understand what you want out of them. And as a result, it kind of creates like a big, like I mentioned earlier, a big culture fit, where
Yeah.
you love what you're doing and they love what you're doing. I'd say the third biggest tip would be to stay disciplined.
Mm,
It's hard to stay consistent, whether like in all aspects of life. I know a lot of people who want to get fit, but don't go to the gym every day and aren't able to stay committed.
mhm,
It's about how bad you really want it. And I remember when I was a kid, I would say that I was hungry, but then my mom would ask if I wanted to eat something, and I would say no, and she would tell me, then you're not hungry enough. And I think that applies here. If you get, a great job opportunity that fits you, but let's say the pay isn't exactly what you want, then you don't want the job enough. You want something
Yeah.
that fits exactly what you want, and you're being a little too greedy for it. So stay disciplined, and don't be too greedy with what you get.
Yeah, I think that summed up your tweet perfectly. And just being disciplined isn't just about actions too. It's about like your thoughts. Being
Yeah,
disciplined on if you have a thesis in mind, like keeping it straight and narrow. Because if you adjust it constantly, you're always going to be disappointed. You'll never get what you want. That's it. It's great, Derrick. You coming on here, I hope and I know is going to be helpful for a lot of people. So many. I'm going to send this to my little sister who is on the job hunt right now. So if it doesn't help anybody, it's going to help her. And we have a large network of people that are constantly coming us looking for jobs in crypto. So
awesome.
thank you. I've got two more questions that I ask all my guests. First one being, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book is Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh,
I'd
I
say,
need to read that.
yeah, I'd say it's a pretty popular book for people around me. A lot of my friends are like founders and influencers, so that book really resonates with them, and I think it resonates with what I want to do, and kind of sets the foundations for what I think are the basics and living a successful life.
Snaps to that. And how do you become a good decision maker?
I'm gonna go back to it, but I think you become a good decision maker through consistency, and
Mm.
with that comes mistakes and things that you can learn from. And as a result, the more mistakes you go through, the better decision maker you'll become.
Absolutely. That is wise words, Derrick.
Thank
You've
you.
added a lot of value here to the hiring, job seeking community. Thank you again. I'm gonna have little screenshots and blurbs of all of your tweets up here, every step of the way that we talked through it, and I'll link it. We'll get this posted. And I think 2 weeks is what I have this scheduled in for.
Awesome.
And thank you again for your time, everybody. Be like Derrick. Derrick's got it figured out, not just because he figured it out, but because he manually did the work to figure it
Yes.
out. Yeah. So thank you, Derrick. I appreciate your time. All righty. I will talk to you later. Have a good one.